Tuesday, January 9th. It is 7 p.m. and this is a Zoom-only virtual meeting. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak. Tonight's meeting, as I mentioned, is via Zoom only. And we do not have capability to meet in public physically, but we are meeting via Zoom. So what that means is all votes tonight will be roll call with the video camera on for all voting tonight. And alternatively, this meeting will be live streamed via YouTube and is being recorded for everyone's future enjoyment. And you can get that information on the town website for the link for the meeting after it's posted. We will then go ahead and get started. Well, I guess we should do a quick roll call. We do have a few planning board members here. We do have myself, Chairman Chad Peck. The Vice Chair, Chris Montfort, is going to be delayed. He's said he'll be joining us about 8 p.m., but he will be able to join us later this evening. We do have, I see Gary Sullivan. Can you, yep, thank you.
Hello and good evening.
Yes, and we have Eric Diamond.
Hello.
Great. And we also have our town planner, Rich McCarthy, and our admin assistant, Bessie Fajol. So we are still waiting on, oh, I just now see Melissa. So can you say hello?
Hello.
Great. All right. So we're just missing Chris. He will be joining us, like I said, around 8 o'clock. All right. So with that, our first order of business on the agenda is the Master Plan Steering Committee meeting number 9. So I will hand this off to Josh and his team and let him take it from there.
Thank you very much, Chad, and good to see everyone again this evening. Happy to be here. We're joined by the second half of our team tonight to talk through the part 2 of the strategies, which we began last meeting with you all. So we have our topics. Let me share my screen. So we have the presentation in front of us. Right, hopefully you all can see that fine. Very good, I see a thumbs up. So very straightforward again this evening. I know that we've got about an hour since you all have another hearing scheduled at 8, so we'll try to keep ourselves succinct as a team. But first up will be discussion of the remaining strategies, of which there are 4. Then we have a draft plan outline, which we shared with the committee as well. And we'll just spend a few minutes talking through that and see if there's any feedback or questions. And then have a few meaningful next steps that we just want to make sure are on the group's radar. But I will not take up too much time from our strategy presenters this evening, and we will just dive right into that. So an unusual meeting where you don't get to hear from me as much, but you get to hear from the team. All right, so let's kick it off. Well, I guess, sorry, I do have a couple slides I can introduce. So just a reminder that this is the overall hierarchy of our work that we've referred to quite a bit. We have this evening, if I'm not mistaken, historical and cultural resources, community facilities and services, open space and recreation, and community health as well are the remaining 4. And these are all squarely in the range of identifying solutions, which is where we are in the process, and at that level of strategies. So underneath the goals at a more detailed level in between where we are now and the final step, which is providing the action steps in the implementation roadmap. All right, so now, without further ado, I will pass it along to Lindsay and Abby to talk through the historical and cultural resources strategies.
Thank you, Josh. So I'm Lindsay Randall. I'm the Regional Humanities Specialist, and I'm doing the historic resource section. And I'll go over my stuff before I kick it over to my colleague, Abby. I also just want to preface this by saying in about 2 weeks, on the 23rd, I'll be actually driving down and meeting with the Historical Commission to get some of their feedback and everything. So I just want to preface that by saying, you know, we couldn't do the December meeting and everything, but we will be going to the January one. So the first goal that we had talked about last time was strengthening understanding and documentation of historic resources and narratives. And then some of the strategies for that are to develop and implement a comprehensive historic preservation plan. So for Norfolk, so it's essentially a master plan for historic resources for the town. Also expanding and updating documentation of sites related to under-recognized communities, and then make active efforts to share this valuable information with the whole community. Also, another strategy is expanding communication that highlights history and historical resources. Some of the examples that community members had given was like a newsletter highlighting this day in Norfolk history, or something related with the library, kind of a variety of different ways that can be taken. And then also expand access to history and historical resources. You guys already have a really good sort of walking tour and things like that, but how can that sort of be expanded throughout the rest of the town and really get that in front of people? Another goal is to prioritize funding and increased resources for historical preservation and other related activities, such as heritage tourism. And so in hearing some of the interviews and everything, that CPA funding doesn't actually get a lot of historic projects put before it. So how can, we come up with a strategy for that, and also increasing some of the funding, not by a lot, but of the historical commission, so that they can focus on some of these different projects. Another goal was promoting more alignment between preservation efforts and town-led projects. So again, incorporating members of the Norfolk Historical Commission into town-wide projects to ensure comprehensive representation and insights from a historical perspective. Things like this master plan, like going to at least talk with them if they're not part of the sort of committee. I know in the OSRP that you guys had, that there was some sections where they were identified as probably being the lead group to undertake some of those recommendations and everything. So just really making sure that they're embedded in those projects, either as full members or, maybe an advisory group or whatever, that they're just being checked in on. Next one, Josh. And then another one is to preserve and protect Norfolk's rich historical heritage. So that could be through just reevaluating and just kind of checking in on the demo delay bylaw to see if it is serving a preservation purpose, versus is it just causing delays in development and just, making those costs go up, right? Like there's that tension where you can have a demo delay, but if you're not doing anything, it's not really that effective, and it's just driving up costs. So how do you make it an effective preservation tool and everything? And then another one is, again, assessing known historic sites for vulnerability against climate change, natural disasters, other risks. Like, are they in like some of the flooding areas? And just kind of knowing that there are grants and stuff you can get to help with historical assets if you do find them in those areas. Another one is potentially forming a local historic district or districts to enhance community development and safeguard historical sites. Again, ensuring that the growth is both considerate and complementary to the town's character. Like we heard this a lot from community members, right? That you don't want development to sort of change the, fabric that is Norfolk. So this could be one way to look at doing that. Another one is to acknowledge the historical significance of all the agricultural land that you guys have, and to support residents who, for a variety of different reasons, might be wishing to implement conservation restrictions on their properties, or if they're looking to sell, maybe instead of selling to a developer, helping sort of funnel them or put them in touch with some groups. Some could be conservation groups, others could be indigenous led, like the Rematriation Collective that is active down in your area. Another goal is use historical landscapes as mitigation for flooding and other climate resiliency. And that, again, could be incorporating both pre-contact and historical landscapes through the use of native plants as climate resilient measures. to counteract climate change, especially flooding. Another one is to collaborate with Indigenous-led groups like the Native Land Conservancy to put in place cultural respect easements. And don't worry, for both of those, what a historical landscape and a cultural respect easement. We would define that in the master plan. And put those on conservation areas in Norfolk. And so that can help with, so a cultural respect easement, if you're not aware, it is a legal agreement that most times on conservation land, it's leave no trace. So this allows Indigenous communities within Massachusetts to go on and maybe remove stuff for medicinal or, reasons to hold ceremony and stuff like that. And that can actually help with land management. Next one, I'll kick it over to Abby.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Hello, everybody. I'm Abby Judd, Regional Arts and Culture Planner 2 with MAPC. And to pick up where we left off with cultural resources and goals, the first goal is really to sustain and expand the community and cultural events that are ongoing in Norfolk. And some of the strategies that we've identified underneath that goal include making an inventory of events, for organizers to improve communication and coordination of those events, including the Norfolk Cultural Council, the Public Library, and Senior Center, Recreation Department, and other community-based organizations who are organizing a lot of these events that are ongoing. And also continuing at the theme of coordination, making sure to coordinate with the historic preservation processes and cultural organizations to identify those shared priorities to move forward. Something else that is another strategy is just reviewing the signage bylaws and town approved processes that might prevent public art installations for the future, and just to revisit those to know what those barriers might be. And then the next goal is really to expand the town resources to support arts and cultural businesses. And already one of the first strategy is to work with Norfolk Cultural Council to highlight the local businesses and entrepreneurs, potentially with temporary art activations or local performances, and thinking of creative ways to connect with the Cultural Council. And again, the second strategy is inviting members of the creative economy to serve as part of the Cultural Council to help really direct resources and be in community on deciding how to best highlight artists, entrepreneurs, and creative businesses within the town. And then finally, and relatedly, hosting networking events for artists and cultural businesses throughout the region can be something that could be expanded upon through the Cultural Council as well. Moving on to our next goal is coordinating opportunities to highlight regional arts and cultural resources. Some of the strategies proposed under this goal are really building and strengthening networks across the region for arts and cultural resources, knowing that Norfolk is already doing this through funding for the Norfolk Cultural Council. And there are also facilities like the Medford State Hospital, now Belforge Arts, that are local and available, an easy resource to access. Another opportunity is to establish public-private partnerships to expand arts education for the public schools, thinking about in-school curricula, staffing, or enrichment activities like field trips through the public library, the senior center, and also school events in Franklin and Medfield as local communities close by with a lot of arts resources. And then the final strategy under this goal is really exploring that regional coordination and collaboration of arts and cultural events with neighboring communities and their cultural councils to see what can be leveraged for larger events. And then the final goal for our section is really integrating arts and culture opportunities into public space development and planning. And so this includes where a lot of arts and culture are already happening within public facilities like the library, Town Hill being a site for different events, and then also the local school, and thinking about how to support the quality of connection and quality of life, and also highlighting some of the historic narratives that Lindsay mentioned a moment ago. Another strategy under this goal is really identifying the public parks and recreation facilities where public art might be included in part of renovations or design or construction, and can tell the story or history of Norfolk as part of that and reflect the members of the community who are present today. And then finally, just ensuring that public facilities and resources remain accessible to Norfolk community members, particularly for youth and seniors, noting that spaces for youth to go and participate in the community was a common thing that we heard across engagement. And from there, I will hand it off for the open space and recreation piece. It's open space, environment, sustainability.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Courtney Lewis. I'm a senior planner at MAPC. And I'll just start off by saying a number of the goals and strategies for the open space and environment and sustainability section of the comprehensive plan are closely related to and actually support a number of the cultural and historic goals as well as transportation. So the first goal, the strategies for goal one are focused on equity, safety, and connectivity. They look at increasing access for everyone, regardless of age and ability, the equitable distribution of facilities, and ensuring people have access no matter where they live in town, and also um, um, ensuring that investments are made to in pedestrian infrastructure. So connecting people with places and also making those spaces safe for pedestrians. Goal two is uh, is is about taking a holistic approach to the town's parks and open space system. The strategies for this goal really focus on the maintenance and upkeep of existing facilities, expanding programming and activities for all segments of the community. That includes active recreation programming, nature-based studies and programming, as well as arts and culture. Next goal. Goal three incorporates recommendations from previous uh, uh, studies that support protecting and enhancing the town's natural resources, ecological and environmental and ecological systems. Improving and maintaining the town's environmental health. Um, um, Ensuring that measures are being taken to address soil erosion and runoff. That those things both affect water quality, which is a big issue I know for the town. And then also looking at invasive species. These all of the strategies under this goal are reference or are pulled from previous studies done, like the MVP report or the hazard mitigation plan. So they support numerous other efforts and studies that have already taken place in the town. Um, as well as goal 4, which looks at leveraging open space and conservation areas to advance some of those resiliency goals. As Lindsay mentioned a moment ago, looking at using some of those historic landscapes to not only for recreation, but also as performative landscapes. So the using the landscape to help alleviate and regulate things like flood control and, as I mentioned, improving water quality. So incorporating things that will just help improve the environmental health of the town. The next goal and strategies are um, are about the social, cultural, and historic elements that are embedded in these public spaces and in the landscape, and then using those elements um, to convey a narrative that really tells people and the community about the history of the town, from agriculture to farm from agriculture to other historical events that have taken place, but also how people interact and use these spaces today. So highlighting those things and prioritizing um, um, uh, as Abby mentioned, incorporating things like public art to draw people into spaces and to help tell the story of things that have happened um, throughout time. Um, and then the last goal is really about ensuring that uh, parks and recreation that the town has the necessary resources to not only maintain parks and open spaces, but also to help support staff who maintain and oversee these spaces. So tracking and prioritizing capital improvements, proactively addressing maintenance needs, and then also pursuing uh, alternative funding options and sources for improvements. And now I'll hand it off to Brian, who will talk about community facilities and services.
Good evening, everybody. Now to talk about my favorite topic, community facilities and services. So you're going to see a couple key themes throughout these goals and strategies. We're going to talk about accessibility and communication. We'll also talk about the enhancement and sustainability of services, business continuity, and we'll discuss a couple of discussed locally, like upcoming trends in municipal service that Norfolk is definitely not going to be spared from, and so addressing those challenges through some of these strategies. So just to start, continue to refine. The first goal is to continue to refine and professionalize the town's capital improvement and budget process. I mean, I think we've seen over the last 3 or 5 years that the process has been taking some really great steps to professionalize, just in terms of like the capital improvement plan is taking a large step. And it looks really it's much easier for residents to access, and so this goal does acknowledge those and then continue building off the progress that you've already made. So the first strategy is establish clear goals and objectives for each town and department and reference them in budgetary discussions. I think a lot of this work has already been done. I think it's buried on page 130 of the 150-page annual report. So I think just kind of highlighting and bringing those things forward, as well as we link those to the budget process. And there's a lot of steps you can take to kind of link those two things to give people more tangible views on how to, on budgetary decisions. Strategy 2 would be build and enhance systems that collect operational metrics on each department, link that information directly with budget, and better inform budgetary decisions. So those two kind of go hand in hand. Invest in educating the community on municipal services, decisions, and finance by creating accessible education programs like a Citizens Academy, creating a community outreach position, and a function to oversee resident engagement. I think to prioritize communication and get residents involved, you really got to invest in those types of efforts, and that's what this strategy is speaking to. The next goal is to identify opportunities to generate clean energy and prioritize investments that reduce the town's carbon footprint. So a lot of the on the front end of modernization, trying to limit and build more sustainable municipal practices. So the first strategy, conduct a municipal energy audit of all facilities. That includes the primary source of energy, demand, variance, and evaluates the overall cost of fuel and system maintenance versus the cost of cleaner alternatives. I think you'll often see the cost for early adopters is really high, and then there's often a point, especially when funding kind of bridges the gap, where there's always an opportunity where it's more cost effective to pursue those cleaner alternatives. And it's making sure that Norfolk is staying, is continually reevaluate that decision, their current decisions on sources of energy. Identify, evaluate, and prioritize clean energy generation opportunities on public assets to begin electrifying municipal services. So just using your current existing assets to generate generate electricity. The next strategy is to continue the effort to expand infrastructure that assists Norfolk municipal departments adopt clean energy methods by approving relevant capital requests. So the same thread, the next strategy, upgrading Norfolk DPW, police, and school facility electrical services to enable high-powered electrical equipment and charging, and phase out gas-powered equipment as large equipment requires a large feed for electrical services to power those types of the type of equipment, specialty equipment. So you need to upgrade that. And then, phasing in an electrical municipal fleet. So that's all a long process. Next slide. The next goal is emphasize resilience and sustainability of town services and infrastructure by investing in areas that protect business continuity. So as Courtney already mentioned, continue to implement actions identified in the MVP program, reduce vulnerabilities and pursue state funding for building community climate resilience. For example, preventative tree maintenance. Apologies, I knocked my headphones out. So preventative tree maintenance, evolution of dam conditions, and emergency shelter provisions. The next strategy is to strengthen digital infrastructure to protect against increasingly common cyber attacks and data breaches. There's a lot of regulations and changes in this field. I think when we think about business continuity and sustainability, everyone's worried about cyber, but actually investing in the staff and the services necessary to kind of protect yourself. We've learned that's not a binary check mark that I've made this investment and we're protected. And those can have, as we've seen in local and communities near Norfolk as well, it can have dramatic impacts to the continuity of services. And then target municipal investments toward town center and Route 115-1A to attract private investment and commercial growth. The next goal is to make town facilities and the policies and process that drive decisions more accessible. So in the same thread of accessibility, conducting an external facilities assessment to inform the capital improvement planning process. Another strategy is formalizing a transparent decision-making framework to evaluate and prioritize capital improvement spending. Improve accessibility of community facilities in public areas by continuing to implement steps in prior self-evaluations. And then occasionally undertake a comprehensive review of the town charter and organization of the legislative special acts, which I could talk about much longer than anyone wants to have. We can talk about that. Then the next goal is to prepare for challenges in the municipal labor market and the rising cost of services. As I mentioned before, trends in municipal service, the municipal workforce is aging out, and there is going to be a considerable amount of energy needed to be focused on maintaining and sustaining the services that you currently have. And so the first strategy for that would be to conduct a formal succession planning study to evaluate Norfolk's current practices and continually improve town policies to improve organizational sustainability. The next strategy, develop relationships with higher education staff and offer professional paid internship programs to local students. I can speak to this one very directly. I got my start in municipal government internship program, and so I'm not the only one. And so kind of developing those pathways from higher ed. Boston area has a wealth of colleges and universities, and to make that pathway a lot more accessible for to access the talent needed to continue to maintain services. Foster collaboration and partnerships with neighboring municipalities at each department level to promote knowledge sharing and service sharing. And document processes and procedures in strengthening onboarding in the HR process. The next goal is to encourage more frequent collaboration across Norfolk boards and committees for increased efficiency and effectiveness. One thing that we've heard throughout the process is that there's a lot of boards and committees. It's as a resident, it can be difficult to kind of keep track of where everything is, and then also as even participants, they would like to work closer together. And so these strategies are kind of are aimed at kind of improving the efficiency and effectiveness of the current infrastructure for boards and committees. And so the first strategy, each board and committee should establish clear goals and reevaluate annually. Next strategy is boards and committees should encourage joint meetings where multiple approvals or perspectives are required. For example, encourage shared pre-development review meetings. Another strategy, make space within limited meeting times and busy agendas for implementing town priorities. And the last strategy, become more proactive in recruiting new voices in town government and maintaining commitment and continuity for town volunteer positions. And then next slide. Yes, and so the last goals and strategies that I'll share with you tonight, strengthen and expand the town's enterprise fund offerings to provide better services, to better provide services. The first strategy is to continue to expand water service in town to eventually include every residence in Norfolk. That was one that I believe was already we're highlighting it here. Had been talked about in past engagement. The next strategy, to continue to explore wastewater solutions for town center and the funding mechanisms that may be needed to support investment. Been frequently discussed, but I thought it was important to highlight here too. Continue to invest in water quality and water treatment to anticipate future regulations. For example, PFAS regulations require significant investments for impacted municipalities. And lastly, invest in the stormwater system to keep pace with increased rainfall intensity and duration. For example, complete a condition assessment of all culverts and enact an operations and maintenance program and evaluate the possibility of creating a stormwater utility. This is one that actually a lot of neighboring communities have explored and really well documented the process that they've gone through. So there's a lot of knowledge to be able to be shared and to go through a similar type of process, but it's obviously a very political process. So it's important to be very thorough and gather as much information so that everyone has the information needed to make the right decisions. So that is it for me, and then I'm going to pass it off to community health.
Great, thanks, Brian. I'm standing in for Sarai Zalata tonight. She wasn't able to join us, so I'll just talk us through quickly the community health strategies, and then we can take a pause and a breath. I know that we're laying a lot of detailed information out again. So the community health strategies are really focused on expanding the Board of Health's capacity to holistically support community health needs. So that involves continuing regional collaboration with partners such as the Metacomet Public Health Alliance to deliver public health services through those shared municipal initiatives and possibly expanding those in the future, increasing the collection and use of local health data, both from community and publicly available sources to support those public health efforts, and then developing and implementing a communication strategy to inform residents, businesses, and municipal staff about the existing health services and potentially to define areas of growth in the future as well. The goal for improving infrastructure to increase safety, accessibility, walkability, and connectedness. This, of course, is a cross-cutting theme, both including community health, but touching on many other topics as well. So ensuring Regional Vision Zero plan and other transportation plans prioritize improvements that support health by eliminating traffic fatalities and injuries and promoting accessible design. So really a focus on pedestrian safety there. And I'll just note that there's a Regional Vision Zero plan which the town of Norfolk can benefit from as well. So that's a process which will be underway in the coming months. The investing in bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure that connects residents to destinations that support health, such as local food, grocery stores, shops, commercial districts, recreational destinations, such as the indoor soccer or other locations such as transit and local schools. And that relates also to things like the Safe Routes to School programs and such. The goal is sustain and expand access to local food in town. So increasing food access by improving transportation to grocery stores. One of the things that we have heard well in the process is that there's an absence of local in-town grocery stores, that a lot of people are going out of town to do their grocery shopping, which is for some a good thing, for some an issue. And there's not real clarity on whether or not which way that should head in terms of where a grocery store could be located, nor is it in the town's control fully. But one way to have an impact there is to think about ways to get households to the grocery stores where they currently exist and improving those options, even for households which may be limited in their vehicle ownership. Continuing to support and expand local food production and distribution through community gardens, which exist in the town today, and thinking about ways that that could be expanded to include more households. And then also the local farmers market, which does occur on Town Hill, and thinking about how that can be expanded and grow the number of households which it touches with local food. And then thinking about how to facilitate local food procurement, both at restaurants, but also for events, including those at schools, municipal facilities, maybe also some of the school lunch and food programs, and where their food procurement is occurring, and if there are options for local procurement for any piece of that. The next goal is identifying and remediating sources of pollution that may impact water quality in the town. This first strategy includes identifying locations where stormwater systems are not adequate for increases in rainfall intensity and duration. And this is again echoing and highlighting some of the vulnerabilities which were expressed in the municipal vulnerability preparedness planning that the town has done as well. So one way that the master plan can be effective is elevating those plans which have been put forward so that they get more attention and implementation. So that's one of those items there. Continuing to work with owners of contaminated sites to support possible remediation and redevelopment options, for example, at the continuing processes at the Southwood Hospital property, and the importance of remediation at that site. Next goal is supporting improvements that address the overall health and well-being of residents with a special focus on the unique needs of youth and seniors. So providing programs which look at the social and emotional connections for both of those populations, both youth and older residents. And I think that the Recreation Department does a great job with its programming and just thinking about those populations in specific and how they relate to the vast variety of recreation programming and other programs that are provided. Strengthening relationships between organizations that may work with these populations directly, thinking about possibilities for intergenerational opportunities at the Council on Aging or other facilities or programs where you can actually bring these two populations together and have meaningful exchange and enrichment opportunities. And then establishing a youth council is one way to elevate youth issues and both empower youth to be involved in decisions that affect their community and to potentially even grow the next generation of volunteers and those who might be civically oriented and minded in support of the Norfolk town government. The next goal is increasing opportunities for social engagement and community connectedness. So again, focusing on town center as a center point of the community and activating the town center as a gathering space for events, programming, and to serve as a community anchor for community members of all ages. Leveraging the public facilities to support connection between residents by enhancing those recreation services, thinking about adult classes, which may fill
I think we lost Josh.
activities that might directly relate to and then go to my internet just said I'm unstable. Okay, all right. Looks like I'm back. Sorry about that. My internet said it was unstable. All right. The last strategy under this goal is to collaborate with local and regional organizations to support social and cultural gatherings, celebrations, and lifelong learning. So thinking about what's occurring beyond the municipal boundaries and where we can leverage activities in other communities as well. So I know we laid a lot on you all again in this second round of strategies. I guess what I would say here is maybe a little bit of note of reassurance that What we're trying to do is, as a team, get to populating all of the detailed information to help get very concrete ways that the goals will be advanced. And now that we have a lot of this information populated, one of the things we'll be doing is also taking a step back so that we can look for the overarching themes again and not get too lost in the details, but make sure that in with this depth of information and very specific items that we've talked through in the last two meetings, you also get priorities and you also get the overarching themes about how these details build to something larger that we've heard and are articulated in the vision statement and the master plan as well. So I would just say that don't feel like we're going to get lost in all these details that we've talked about, but also that the details are important as well. I will pause too, since we have again laid a bunch on you, just to see to open the floor and see if there's any comments, questions, or thoughts. All right, seeing no movement in that regard, I will hand it off to Andrea now, just to talk us through in more concrete terms how all of this will come together as a master plan document.
Thanks, Josh. Hi, everyone. Hope you all had good holidays, and it's nice to see you in the new year. So as Josh mentioned, we've been doing a lot of behind the scenes work to really dive into strategy options of how to accomplish all of those goals. But we're also thinking about sort of where we're going, big picture of how this is going to all come together into the plan at the end of the day. So in the email leading up to this meeting, you got the presentation. You also received, hopefully, and maybe had a chance to take a peek at a PDF that's a really kind of high level, but still a little detailed outline of where we see the plan kind of taking shape. We thought now was a good time in the process to share with you our thought process for how we pull all of this information together. A few things that we're trying to keep in mind is that we know that master plans cover a lot of information and a lot of ground, and it can also be kind of intimidating of a document for kind of the average resident to pick up and look through. So as we're thinking about what we want to include in the final plan, we are trying to think of really a streamlined approach that gets the information that's most relevant, but also, has some appendices and technical documentation for all of the work that you all have been doing through this process with us. But we really want to try to hit the highlights in the planning document itself. So that's what this graphic kind of starts to represent, and the outline goes into further detail of first, we want it to clearly kind of introduce this process and explain, why you all decided to take on this endeavor since the 2007 master plan, kind of what's changed over the last 15 years, and why it's important for Norfolk to think about where you all are today, but then where you want to be moving forward. And then, we've been doing a lot of process with this project, and we think it's really important to highlight all of the different ways that we've gotten out into the community and include that kind of up front in the timeline and in the introduction. So we really see the introduction kind of setting the stage for why Norfolk is doing this, what is a master plan, and how it can, show the residents of the town how the town's going to take action to move forward. We also think it's really important to get the vision in there early. So way back in the fall, we talked about the draft vision. So we'll have the vision statement, those guiding principles that have been getting refined along the way. And then we want to do what we call a spatialized vision. It's kind of a pretty map that can kind of articulate, what we're hearing. Things like you want to grow in town center, you want to make sure that you're continuing to invest in the 115 1A area. There's the redevelopment opportunity at Southwood, kind of just put on the map all of these different opportunities so that, again, if it's kind of the random border committee member or a random resident who picks this up in town hall and they flip to this map, ideally they can kind of get a snapshot for where the town is going just by looking at a nice map. So in the outline, we kind of start to visualize that a little bit more of what we see going into this map. The next section is really digging into the goals and strategies. So you may recall that we provided that existing conditions brief back in August, I think. Had a lot of really good data, but we know that's a lot of information. So we want to kind of drill that down, have kind of a quick facts area, part of the narrative, have some key takeaways, and then really show what those goals and strategies are. So all of the information that was just shared with you. And then include, some maps that kind of show existing conditions, some graphics, some pictures of like historic sites that you're working to preserve. But you can kind of, again, just at a glance, really get a sense for where the town is heading for these different policy areas that we've been focusing on. The last part, which is my favorite, is what I call the action plan. So it's really taking this kind of whole list of different strategies and drilling it down into some top focus areas. And I think that we want to work with you at upcoming meetings to really drill down into what those focus areas should be, because we know that you can't address everything and accomplish everything that's going to be included in the plan. But we really want to work with you all to figure out an actual strategic implementation strategy. This action plan section can also talk about what implementation looks like. It can mention, what's been accomplished since the last master plan, and then talk about different approaches to implementation. So I think that this will be the most probably relevant and used chapter for you all as the planning board and for other boards and committees. But we really think that this is where the rubber will meet the road, and it'll kind of show how you're going to take all of the information that we've been gathering and hearing over the last year and start, making your individual work plans for boards, committees, and departments. So again, that was a lot of information to throw at you. Happy to answer any questions that y'all may have. We would also love to hear if this isn't the direction you want us to go with the planning document. We are open to evolving this to make it fit the needs that you all have.
I have a question about the action plan. Are there frameworks for how we prioritize things that would make their way onto that plan, or is that where MAPC steps in to give us guidance? Like how does that prioritization work?
Yeah, so I think that we certainly want to probably do a 1 or 2 meetings with you all to just kind of have more of a facilitated discussion that shares what we've been hearing from the public engagement, because I think that the things that we're hearing through that can naturally kind of show where the priorities lie from the community. And then we can have more of a discussion with you all to say, here are things that are short-term accomplishments. And if that's a priority to have some like short-term wins, then this is the path that you can go. If you all really want to tackle one big thing that's going to have a lot of impact, then we can kind of show you some different pathways. So I see it hopefully being an interactive discussion that we can have.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions?
I don't have a question, Andrea, but I do love the idea of having the comparison between what's been done, since the last master plan, because there has actually been a lot that's happened over time. There are still, of course, similarities between the last one and what we'll have on this one, but I think it's nice for people to see how much has happened and also how long these things can take over time, so that they kind of have a, just an expectation that it's not going to happen overnight, but these are the things that we're able to do in X number of years, and hopefully we can do more in the next upcoming years type of thing. But I think that would be a really useful document, and I love the action plan idea because, this is all great, but if we don't put it into action, then it's just going to be a really beautiful document that you guys spent a lot of time on. So I think the action plan is definitely important.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Melissa. All right. Well, seeing none, we can move on through next steps. Am I handing it back to you, Josh? Take us home.
Sure. Yeah, so we are rounding toward the final steps here. So we will devise, as the question Gary you raised suggested, around giving the committee information about how to make those prioritizations. We'll be able to look at that in a few different ways as we move into this final phase that you see outlined for February to April, which is defining priorities. So we're sitting on a mountain of data and community feedback now. So we'll look at some different ways to kind of cut that data and bring that forward to the committee so that we can help make that prioritization decision together. as we move toward the remaining months of this process now, we will be doing a few things kind of simultaneously. One of them is currently we have underway a compilation review of all the feedback we received on if you recall, the vision statement and the goals have been out gathering feedback. We have all that feedback now and are compiling it to see what types of adjustments, revisions, or tweaks should be made to that content based upon the community feedback. That will potentially impact what we presented over the last 2 meetings, and as it should. And will also potentially trickle down into some of the strategies as well. But we anticipated that and will make adjustments as needed. Along with that, we'll also begin in earnest sort of compiling all this in the form of the plan, which Andrea just outlined, and then also be moving into that definition of priorities for concentrating this final phase on the effort of defining the content of that action plan, which is really at this point the main remaining item, like the most detailed, if you recall, under vision, there's goals, then strategies, then actions. So it's that action plan, the very most detailed level, which remains in terms of populating the content for it. And all of this, we hope, and based upon processes past, it will all kind of snap together and the chaos will smooth out a little bit, at least for us. Hopefully you all don't get to feel or see as much of the chaos, but we will have a few things moving and then it will all come together. As part of all of that, we do have a few more tangible next steps as well. We'll be coordinating with Rich to revisit what we started this process with almost about a year ago exactly, actually, where we came to the town and had a series of meetings with department heads and got the initial conversations going with them. But now the intention is to return to those conversations to share the draft goals and strategies and gather the feedback that will help us both give us another set of data points in terms of refining all of this content, but also thinking about the prioritization and implementation as well. That is scheduled for the 17th, which is coming up shortly now. And Rich I'll be in touch with you, Rich, just to make sure that we get organized and ready for that. Then the next steering committee meeting we have on our schedule is for February 13th. And we will be coming back with the compilation of feedback that I described and presenting that back to the committee in sort of a recap way in which we talk about the types of changes that we think should occur based upon that information so that the committee is able to weigh in on that as well. And then we'll also begin that conversation around prioritizing for implementation in the action plan. With that, just a reminder for everyone that we continue to update the Norfolk Master Plan website, and all these variety of presentations and in-process documents can be found there as well. I think that is it for us. I thank you all. I'll stop sharing, and we're happy to entertain any questions if any have come up towards the end here.
I don't see any hands raised, Josh, but I did want to say thank you very much to you and your team. Great presentation. Looking forward to our next meeting.
Great. We are looking forward to the next steps in the process as well. And we thank the board and the committee for the time this evening. Really, really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you again. All right, Rich, Josh did an excellent job staying within an hour. We have 5 minutes to spare. Great job. We do have, if there aren't any other questions for Josh, we'll let them, they're more welcome to stay on, but we'll let them go. The next item on our agenda is a public hearing at 8, so we're a little early for that.
You are, so I would recommend you could
meeting minutes.
hold on that and go, well, you could do minutes or you could do the 19 Shire because I think that should be pretty straightforward
Okay.
to the temp CO.
Yep, we could do that. So we had an appointment at 8:30 for 19 Shire Drive. Now we had told the property owner that he did not need to. He had talked to Rich and he did not need to attend. It's a pretty straightforward extension. He's got a request in to extend the temporary occupancy. It does currently expire on January 10th, which is tomorrow. The recommendation would be to extend that until May. I don't remember the exact date in May, but Rich can remind us of that. But just like we did for 17 Shire Drive, and that has to do with the coordination of Shire Drive and the DPW and how to handle all those improvements on Shire Drive.
Yeah, so the recommendation is for May 22nd, which is
Okay.
what the board did previously for 17 Shire.
Okay. So the request then was made to do an extension to May 22nd, which is, like I said, in alignment with what we did previously for 17 Shire. Does anybody have any questions, further discussion on that? I see nothing. So then I would entertain a motion to extend the temporary occupancy of 17 Shire Drive for May 22nd, 2024.
Moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. And I don't see Chris on here, so that's just the four of us then. Okay. All right, Rich, there we got that.
We go to minutes next if you want.
Minutes, Eric?
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December 12th, 2023 as printed.
So moved.
Do we have Eric made the motion.
Oh,
You
second.
seconding? Okay. It's moved and seconded. Let's do a roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. All right. There we go, Rich. Two things off. Still got a minute or 30 seconds left for MacArthur. Any 30-second blurb you want to squeeze in there? All right.
Boy. No, I can't think of anything.
Any changes to our upcoming schedule?
Well, the good news is, hopefully good news to you all, is so town meeting will be May 15th. So you don't need to move your May meeting, but that means you'll be out 2 nights in a row, which will be May 14th, your regular scheduled meeting, and then the following night would be the annual town meeting on May 15th.
Okay.
So that doesn't, so no changing your schedule for May, unless otherwise needed. Oh, look at that. The clock, I see 8 o'clock.
Okay. All right. It is now 8 o'clock. We will resume the public hearing for 3 MacArthur Ave definitive subdivision roadway improvement project for just one lot, which is 3 MacArthur Avenue. We did receive a letter today from the developer, from the engineer. Pull that up. I had it pulled up and now it's gone. So we did receive a letter today from United Consultants, Chairman Chad Peck and Norfolk Planning Board. Dear Chairman and Planning Board, on behalf of the owner John Robbins, we are requesting the Planning Board accept this request to withdraw the application without prejudice. Thank you in advance for your assistance in this matter. Richard Goodrow. So they have withdrawn their application for 3 MacArthur Way. So I would entertain a motion then to close the public hearing.
Can I just add a question real quick? So we've talked a lot about 3 MacArthur, right? And we've done a lot of research. We have a lot of inputs, but now there's no output, right? So is there a formal way by which we can log opinions and things that we've learned, because this is being withdrawn without prejudice, but it doesn't mean it can't come back before us or a new board, right? Who might want to not reinvent the wheel on this one.
If it if it does come back, or there'll be a file like there is for anything that we have that we would go back to, whether it's this board or some future board, that they could go back and look at the minutes, the videos, the plans, so forth, and some of the commentary. But because they're asking to withdraw without prejudice, there's really no more input formally commentary to this project. There may be a future plan, but for this point, they're asking to really close this one out for now, and may come back.
Okay. So I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So the public hearing is closed. So now would like to entertain a motion to accept the withdrawal without prejudice for 3 MacArthur Avenue.
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Eric?
Aye.
Gary?
Aye.
Melissa?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So public hearing is closed, withdrawal has been accepted, and there we go.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
So we are a little bit ahead, but I do see we have Jeff Kane with us this evening, who would like to discuss informally a site proposal for 71 Pond Street.
Hey, Rich.
Hi, Jeff. Do you want to have control so you can put the plans up, or how you want to?
Yeah, sure. You want to share screen here? Let me get this up here.
Sure. Chris is joining us too.
Great, thank you, Betsy. Chris, just to loop you in, we took care of a few things out of order. We did take care of the 19 Shire Drive and 3 MacArthur Ave, and now we're on the appointment for 71 Pond Street.
Is that up there yet? I see host disabled screen sharing on my screens. You guys see that yet?
Chris? No, I don't see it yet.
Oh, hold on.
And we lost Chris, but that's okay.
Oh, he'll be back.
Yeah, he'll be back. We're here. He'll join us.
Okay, see now?
We do see it now, yes.
Oh,
Excellent.
we got it. All right, here comes Chris is coming back.
So as Rich mentioned, my name is Jeff Kane with LAL Engineering Group. I'm representing Claude Elias, who I believe is on this call as well. Claude is currently looking at this property at 71 Pond Street. He's looking at it to construct a garage facility, about 4,500 square foot garage, where he would be storing personal cars that he would be selling on a off and on basis. It will be a limited car sale type facility. It will be mostly a showroom. There'll be about 10 to 12 cars on the premises at any time. And part of our due diligence process, as we're going through your site plan requirements, we're seeing a couple of issues that might make this a difficult construction. And before we move forward and go through a full submittal, survey plans and everything else, we just wanted to bring this to the board, kind of judge the temperature on a couple of requests we may need to have this actually move forward and become a viable design. So that said, looking at this plan, you can see it's fairly straightforward. The problem with this site, and if you can see my cursor here, there's a significant amount of exposed ledge on this site. And if you walk it, and if you look at the historic soil testing that's been done out there, it's classified as a shallow to bedrock soil type. And though you see a lot of the ledge sticking out, there's a lot more under the ground that's fairly shallow, being down from, just a few feet down to about 8 feet total for the bedrock. Now, there was one area down at the corner here that was determined would be suitable for septic, just suitable for septic. It's still at about a 15 to 18 minute perk rate. So it's not great, but it would work. But the issue we're really going to have here is trying to contain, mitigate, infiltrate any stormwater onto this site. We have done some preliminary modeling with HydroCAD, and as I mentioned, we do have some soil testing that was done in 02, 06, 07. There's been a bunch of holes poked out there, so we have a pretty good idea what's there. And that soil is a dense till. It's classified as dense. Perk rates of 45 minutes. It's just a tough soil, high groundwater, and again, the high level to rock. So any infiltration in the site is going to be difficult. And how we could potentially make this work if the town and the board, would entertain such a development, would be to try to mitigate as much stormwater from the roof of the building as we can in this area here. And the rest of the stormwater would be caught into catch basins, run through a proprietary separator, and put into the municipal system that's in Sherwood Drive right now. Now, under the site plan review, right now, this site as it is does not trigger the stormwater bylaw. We're going to be under an acre of total disturbance. So our stormwater regulations that we're following are based on your site plan requirements under section 325-7416. So we've got a couple issues there, as I mentioned. The biggest one being all stormwater drainage shall be contained on site unless otherwise approved by the planning board. And that's really the crux of why we're here tonight. We wanted to bring this to you to say, hey, do you think, I know nothing's official here, but do you think this would be something that the board would entertain to allow this development to go forward? We can contain what we can try to contain from that building, but we are going to end up with stormwater leaving this site. And though it's a small difference, there will be an increase. Be it, we're talking tenths of a CFS in a 100-year storm, but there is a difference. So that's really why we're here tonight. There's one other issue with parking on the site. We might be 4 spaces short. I don't think that will really be a high hurdle to get over, be it through waiving it, or if we really had to push to get those 4 spaces, we probably could. But as I mentioned to you, it is a limited auto sales, small amount of cars on site, not a lot of employees, and the sales are only done by appointment only. So we're not talking about a lot of traffic and a lot of parking on the site too. So that would be a discussion we could have if we move forward to the actually filing the site plan. But really, as I mentioned, our big issue here is drainage.
So we'd have to understand, we'd have to go back and look at what is the capacity on Sherwood Drive and how that would be impacted before we can answer that.
Well, it's going there anyway. First off, the existing conditions, it is getting to Sherwood Drive. It's going to be going down the gutter line. It's going to go into that system. So it's not like the site is not right now discharging to that area. And it's just a matter of, like I mentioned to you, it's a matter of a small tenths of a CFS difference in that. And I'm not totally sure, even with the margin of error of these modelings, to try to catch up with that CFS, is it acceptable or not? I'd leave that to the board, but the accuracy compared to the size of the site, there is a margin of error on these models.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like I said, we're just trying to get some feedback on this possibility.
I mean, we'd have to, yeah, like I said, I think we'd have to take a little bit more time and look at it, but on the surface, I don't want to speak for the other board members, but I think that's possible. Can't guarantee anything. Anybody else have any other comments?
I mean, at a high level, I'm just looking at this design now. So the stormwater there, it's just going to like the middle of the road there where that stormwater is.
Right here.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So what we would do is right here, we would put in some type of catchment for the roof drains. Now, again, your regulations call for we tried put some type of infiltration. We leave the bottoms open. We use chambers. I know your regs do call for 50-foot offset to a building to any leach pit, but we would look to try to get that waived as well. If there's any type of infiltration we can get on that site, I don't know if we can take credit for it, but we would put some type of containment here. That would then being roof drainage, it would be clean runoff. That would go down and meet to this manhole, which would be proprietary separator anyway, to make sure we treat all the stormwater that's on here. We do need to still meet the MS4 requirements of your town before we discharge that to the street, so. And we tried to put, we put crushed stone in one of the access areas just to try to reduce the amount of impervious areas. So we're trying to minimize what we can out here. It's just a difficult site for the soils, that's all. And it might be a reason it's been sitting here since 2002.
Yep, you might be onto something there. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. But where there's a will, there's a way. I mean,
yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, just the size of the development, we don't believe supports digging the whole area out, making the whole thing a storage of stormwater and bleeding it slowly over the site. It just can't. It can't sustain. It can't pay for itself that way. It's just not that type of development. So we're just probably going to need a little help from the board on this. That's all.
I mean, like I said, from a high level, it's possible. We obviously, once we get the final drawings, we'd run that by Beta, our third-party engineer, and let them do the full analysis, and we'll see what they come up with. But yeah, Rich, do you see any concerns with this?
Would you? I guess the question, and hopefully the answer, may be the board would at least be open to reduce some of the parking if necessary, because it's not. You do have that discretion through the special permit, so that in this case may be warranted. But if the board was,
I guess the only thing I'd say to that, Rich, is, and I appreciate that thought. I think what's shown here is kind of the minimum needed for circulation. And there's going to be some type of flatbed coming in to unload a car or something like that. Okay. So I think kind of what's shown is kind of what's needed.
Okay. So it looks like you have 13 spots shown there.
Yeah, and we'll lose one for the accessible aisle. So
correct.
14 in the building. I mean, we're only going to be, I think we're going to be like somewhere like 4 or 6 short, something like that. And there's probably space in the building if you folks said, no, we really don't want to waive that. We could be creative about it, knowing they're not going to be used. I hate creating things that just aren't going to be used, but I think there's a good argument that we don't need those additional spaces too, based on the use that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it is permissible to count them within the building too. So that's within the park. It is limited. If you see, he's got the zoning setback line, so you can see really the development envelope is pretty limited.
Yeah.
With the setback. If you wanted to put the building forward, you couldn't.
You can't, right? And up here, this is all. I'm sure no one here has ever walked on that site, because all the time I was in town, I never walked on that site until just recently. But this area of ledge right here, I mean, that looks like old Yosemite or something, about 20 feet sticking up in the air. That's pretty impressive looking. So no, we're not putting the building up there.
No, this is a good use of space, I have to say, with what you were given.
And plus I wouldn't walk on it till the winter because I pulled about 6 deer ticks off me too. So, but yeah, it's an interesting lot, but there's not a lot of usability there, unfortunately.
And so, and because of that zoning setback line and the limitations on the site, you will need, if this goes forward, grant a special permit for the parking in the front because it is unfortunately a corner lot, 2 front yards.
Right.
So, which, I mean, in terms of,
But there's
neighborhood
ledge there, right? So we could,
yeah.
so we could make it look nice out front.
Right. Well, and this is one of those like, very, very small little envelope to put the building, and it's really challenging to even find parking behind the building. So,
Right.
I don't. You got to work with what you have, and I think you've done a pretty good job of trying to make it fit. So,
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the parking doesn't really concern me, especially given that it's, just a few employees and the other cars will be in the showroom and it's by appointment only, there's not much variability there.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the idea is making a nice building as well. It's going to be high-end car sales. It's not going to be, junk cars. It's going to be by appointment high-end cars. So we want it to look nice. So,
yep.
And by virtue of the definition for this type of use, it can't be displayed anyway outside.
The cars?
Yeah, because this will be a limited auto sales, which is used cars, but it can't be displayed for public view.
Gotcha.
So you don't have to go in the building behind the curtain, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the parking. I mean, the stormwater, I think it's possible. Well, yeah, you're trying to do as much as you can to mitigate it on site, and
Yep. I mean, the interesting thing is and I think one of you folks, I'm not sure, is an engineer on the board, but you might understand this. We could clear the entire site, get rid of the woods that are in poor condition and put grass down. We'd probably make the stormwater runoff totals, but at the same token, we'd be tearing the entire site up, so it's that close from what we're seeing.
Yep.
So, all right. So it's safe to say the board would entertain it with maybe a slight lean toward being in favor of it.
Yeah. Eric, Gary, Chris, any comments?
This looks okay, and my concern would be underestimating the runoff, but assuming we can get some third-party opinions on that, then the parking for me is not an issue.
I think considering also what you said about the existing runoff is all running that direction as it is now, then you're going to pick up some of it. I think this should fly.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, no comments on my side.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Well, I appreciate your time. Rich, thanks for putting it together.
No problem.
Hopefully we'll get a site plan into you.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr.
All right.
Kane.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Yep.
And ladies.
All right. So, Rich, that takes care of public hearings and appointments. I guess we did the meeting minutes under new business. So the next is town planner updates.
Yes, under town plan updates, we're back to discuss housing choice. There are from the last meeting, town council went through it, and I went through it, sent a little edited version, and then they made some additional comments. So you have a red line version of it. In the process of going through the proposed bylaw, and really trying to apply a potential development project, we identified some things that would need consideration to be either excluded or not applicable in terms of applying them from a standard standpoint, or a waiver, and we'll talk about some of those next. But before we talk about those, there was a few property owners at the last meeting that you had in December, which were interested in potentially being included into the overlay district. And so I wanted to follow up on that discussion and see if there's a thought of the board in terms of those properties, whether to keep them out, maybe to include them, maybe some in, some out, whatever that is, because we would then need to revise the boundary of the overlay district that's originally proposed. Then I would also need to, rerun the calcs on the unit capacity and also the density requirements to see if it changes any of those numbers. I should say. So unit capacity potentially would go up if we didn't take something out. Number of dwelling units per acre may not even change either, but they may change. So we might have to make an adjustment to that. I don't think it'd be significant adjustment, but I would want to run that through the model just to be sure, because once we go through this process, submit it to Department of Housing and Livable Communities, they're gonna need to evaluate and make sure it complies as well as the AG in this case. So I want to make sure we're on point on those. So just to pause, I was gonna share my screen. It looks like did you just disable screen sharing, Betsy? Or no, it's
I don't know. Let me check.
What? I must have signed in differently. I had no controls in here.
Hold on. Let me see. Oh, hold on. I'm going to make you co-host.
All right. That'd be great.
Okay. You should be all set now.
Okay. So I'm going to go to... all right. Well, let me just wake up my computer first, and then I'll share my screen in a second. What I'm gonna share is just the GIS map with the parcel boundaries, the property boundaries, and then also the zoning overlay imposed on top of it, so we could take a look at it. All right. So, okay. All right. So this zooming out much further out. I will zoom in. So essentially, the properties that were under discussion last meeting is this one here, which, as you know, is 15 Rockwood Road, which is just that little lighter color. Just a reminder for the public who's listening in, that's the B1 inner core. The lighter, or darker shade of red, maroonish, is the outer core. The Stephen Fry was the property owner there that was interested in being included. Mr. Chipman's property here, which is on Main Street, 201 Main Street, and I don't think so. Those are two properties for discussion for tonight in terms of inclusion.
So I could see a case to add in the 15 Rockwood Road. That parcel is all by itself on the north side of those tracks, and it is limited street side frontage, minimal street side frontage, and it's a long, skinny lot. I think that would benefit from being included into this.
So I was actually going to say the same thing, Chad. And the reason is so I drive by there all day long for a variety of reasons. And I am concerned. So right now there's just, one business in there. It's very small, limited hours. And then the other units are residential. And I think if we start putting, especially, we have to figure out the ratio of commercial to residential, as the developers mentioned. But I do think that parking is going to be driving in and out of there for a bunch of businesses on the first floor is just going to be a safety issue. Versus if you look at how, which I see them often, when people are leaving there, they're taking a left out of there. The people who live there, it's like they know that it's easier to do that, or maybe they just happen to be going in that direction. But you kind of get into that habit and you're used to seeing the train there. I'm concerned about people coming in, say we get like this fabulous restaurant or a fabulous, something or other, some store that everybody wants to go to. I'm just worried about the in and out there. Of course, I don't know what the design of the building would be, and maybe you would be able to see for miles. I don't think so. But just a little bit of a concern there with people coming in and out that aren't necessarily super familiar with the area and the train being right there.
Yeah, that's all really good point, Melissa.
The only thing though, so with that property, I know for me personally, when we left that off the list before, for me, it was because it was one of very, very few commercial spaces that we have in the downtown area, and it's already occupied. But I think I feel pretty hopeful after our last meeting with Andrew, who, he's responsible for that parcel that's right in front of Walgreens and then the old Stop and Shop lot as well. It sounds like he's willing to work with us on creating something there. So I think it would be nice to have, if we could just try to find places to relocate. If we're going to be taking away a commercial space, maybe we can work with some of these developers to try to relocate, or at least give them options to relocate in Norfolk. I just don't want to have the people who live in Norfolk that want to have their business in Norfolk have to leave Norfolk because we're giving them less space. So I just want to be kind of cognizant of that as we're moving forward. But I do agree with you for the overlay district. That one does make sense.
Anyone else on the board have any other thoughts, comments on that?
I agree. I think it just made sense.
All right.
I think I'm less inclined to do so for the properties that are on the main road, where people can, where there's really no safety issues. People will, it's a double line road already. They're going to be coming and going, and there's plenty of visibility to see other drivers. I mean, I'm less inclined to do that for other properties that are right there in the downtown area. Because I just don't know that there's a reason to be, but maybe we could, or to do it, but maybe we could have something that's a mixed use where it's business out front and maybe some residential in back, or maybe we can have some sort of something like that, some sort of compromise, but just making it all residential right there seems like a huge loss to the downtown area.
Yeah, I would second that as well.
Is that an option within this overlay district?
I'm presuming you're talking really about looking to revisit the mix, how we define mix, the ratios, and then how it's laid out.
Yeah, it sounded to me like we might need to do that. I mean, I know a lot of people who will say, well, we don't have septic downtown and that's why we don't have businesses, but that's really not enough to keep businesses out. And I think we heard confirmation of that in our last meeting from the developers themselves. It's mostly, the inclusionary bylaw that is tiered as the unit number goes up. and then also the 65-35 ratio for commercial to residential. So we'll have to look into those and talk about it further, I think, if we want to have developers feel welcomed to develop here and actually feel incentivized to do so.
Is that a majority consensus? I hear two members, 3, 4, 5.
Three.
What?
There was 3. Chris chimed in.
Oh, on the first one, Chris. Similar on the other properties. Your thoughts?
Sorry, hold on. I'm transitioning from my car.
Okay.
Well, he's coming in. I guess I have a question. Is the housing choice piece here, is it binary? Is it yes or no to be included in here? But the down the road idea of changing the required mix, can you mix that in here with this discussion, or is that a separate issue?
It's a companion. It's a part to this, so it wouldn't be at this. So I'm just thinking in terms of process and timing wise, changing the ratios wouldn't be for May. That would be for either the fall, later this year, to look at, start working on it, but have that prepared for the fall to make those changes. And May would be focused on putting forward the housing choice to be voted on, and then simultaneously you'd be working on changes to the ratios for the fall town meeting.
Right, but the issue right now is defining the zone. So that
Yes.
would be a no for that property to this particular zone.
So yeah, for tonight, essentially you're saying yes or no.
Right.
I think that when we do go for tonight, Eric, yes, you're 100% right. I think when it's reviewed at town meeting, though, there may be people thinking, we're taking away this, one building that was commercial now. So maybe just like, for me, I just wanted to talk through it for kind of my expectation is that I know Rich has been working with some of the developers to kind of gauge their interest level and kind of come up with some creative solutions, see what would be good for them, and that would work for us as a town. So I think it is, like Rich said, it's a companion, but I think it will be part of the discussion when we do have to go to town meeting for this piece. So that's why I bring it up now. Not that
No,
we have
that does make 100% point, because you want to, as you go out and have this discussion, you also want to talk about how through this process further emphasize the point that we need to look at the other piece too, to actually activate and provide an opportunity.
Right.
Because it's not just, it's restrictive. Not only that, but I think the point made at the last meeting, which I think people made, was that the scale of it, right? So you scale that up. I think people, in one sense, they were concerned about having a big box.
Mm-hmm.
But yet this requirement with the all first floor commercial and then residential above is driving right to that point. Like you got to make it big to make it, and it doesn't work. Like they're competing against each other. And I think, and we, and in all honesty, I mean, we did try to tackle this with a B1 too. I think it was a little bit too many pieces being discussed at once to be able to really move on this. So to revisit this isn't unexpected at all, actually.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, Rich, we have so many different variables that have kept development from occurring in this area specifically. One is the sewer is an issue as well. You're limited to the size of the building that you can put in place because of the requirement to put in septic. If we had sewage treatment, that would be something else that would assist with development in this area. But I think these are all valid points. I think it makes sense for us to revisit this. And to your earlier question, I think I'm fine moving forward with the proposed
Okay. Did you want to, is that enough or satisfied on that aspect of this discussion for tonight?
Is there a
As far as the changes in
counter
overlay?
area to
Yes.
be removed somewhere?
What's that?
Is there a different parcel that you're talking about removing from that inventory?
I don't know if I got to run the analysis and see. Maybe there is, but it may not be. I mean, they're not talking about a big change, so it may be it may not be needed. So we'll get the model run and I'll let you know.
Okay.
But to onto the language bylaw next, do you like it screen share that?
Yep.
And then we can talk through it. and I do know, I mean, it's not, I understand the select board hasn't officially voted. They'll be upcoming to vote, but the warrant will be opening up the 23rd of January. And that I know they still need to vote it, quotation. But the closing is going to be, I believe, February 23rd. So basically be open for a month, which allows time to go through additional drafting and hopefully put this in good shape in terms of the language and then submit it to the warrant and then schedule a public hearing. So you see the red line version on your screen?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as I mentioned, some of these are, I think, just editorial and makes sense to change the language. I'm gonna, if you want me to, I'm gonna scroll through, and then if you want to say stop, please do so. If not, I'm gonna get down to some of the things I want to get more of your thoughts on. So,
okay.
Yeah, I should have followed my own self. Sorry. I forgot the affordable ones first. So one that just when I went through this with Marissa Miller, town council's office, we talked about the first version had more, which I talked to Susan Jacobson, the affordable housing director. She's on the call too, on Zoom to weigh in on this. But to switch to the trust themselves, so where there are pieces in here where it was proposed initially at the position level, the director to deal with some of these affordable things. The recommendation would be to switch them to the trust themselves to weigh in on the input. So, for example, this line here, which says the affordable housing director, in terms of that pricing, that would be through the trust themselves. The director would help having the board come to that decision. When we come down to the next one here, where there's the option of potential, whether it be included affordable unit within the development, offsite, a combination thereof, a payment in lieu of, that determination will be made through the trust. The administrative piece is more the documentation, obviously would fall to staff, but just switch these out. And you see this one highlighted here in yellow again to the trust. So there's actually a body to make those decisions. And I think that makes sense to do that, not put upon just one person. So So we would, again, I'm just highlighting, we have to make the adjustments to that language to give it back to the board.
So what you're saying, Rich, is the yellow highlights that for the director, you feel it'd be appropriate to change that to the trust.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
And Susan agrees
And
with that.
Susan agrees with that as well.
Yes, I like Rich, my board, I go to the board for any decisions. And it's a vote is taken, so it makes much more sense for it to be handled that way.
Okay.
Go back to.
We do have a question.
Okay.
Peter, I saw your hand was raised.
Thank you through the chair. Can you hear me?
Yes. Rich, can you screen share again? We lost it.
Yep.
Oh, there we go. Go ahead, Peter.
I'm just trying to load my hand here. I don't think I can, but I just have a comment on the inclusionary housing bylaw change here. I've followed some of your meetings here. I've spoken with both the town planner and Sue Jacobson. And as a citizen of Norfolk who brought the petition forward for the scaled inclusionary housing bylaw that's in effect right now, I'm quite disappointed at everybody's attempt to undo that, which was just approved 2 years ago. They really haven't given any time for the inclusionary zoning bylaw that the citizens of Norfolk approved to have an effect on our housing inventory. This town desperately needs affordable housing. And I do understand the housing choice mandates 10% for that zone that you're trying to create here for the housing choice. And, but the town of Norfolk could have pursued that our inclusionary zoning bylaw could stay in place if they had done the economic feasibility study, which we could have applied for a grant for if we had done that early in the process, but we did not. So unfortunately, it looks like we may have to go with the 10%. So I would ask this board to reconsider keeping the scaled inclusionary zoning bylaw outside of the housing choice zone, to think about that anyway, given that the people in Norfolk approved the scaled affordable housing zoning bylaw just 2 years ago. So I just wanted to make that comment tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Appreciate that.
So to Peter's comment, if the board has a thought tonight, certainly welcome to hear that. If not, that's something that you could give consideration to when we still have time. If that seems like the direction you would want to take. Although I will say, and Peter, I know you've heard that discussion already, but the decision to keep it townwide uniform was not necessarily, I mean, housing choice plays a part in it, but it was also the concern that the present bylaw has put pressure for proposed developments to actually go the other way, instead of coming in under the zoning bylaw as either a subdivision or a multifamily unit project. They're switching out to go as a 40B, which, yes, we'll get more affordable units, but at the same time, we're going to get more different housing type units. So I think that was at least the direction that came from, as you know already. I'm not saying anything you already don't know, but
that's what you're right. That's what
the trust. Yeah, they wanted to make it uniform across the board. So, but I'll let there is still time to make an adjustment. So just we can, if you want to just take that under advisement for tonight,
Yep.
and then we'll continue through, and then we'll so we can, because the objective would be to get this cleaned up in terms of what I would say it's hopefully final form for the February meeting. If we did need to make adjustments, we could always put it in as a placeholder and fine tune it. But because we got a little bit of time, hopefully we can get this to what will be the public hearing version of this. So anyway, I want to go. So as I was saying earlier, one of the things that we took a look at was with the B1, C1, if one were to do a residential only project, there are some provisions in terms of buffer requirements that really are geared towards commercial to residential. And what we're really talking about here in this case is residential, whether it be different residential housing type units. So some of those requirements don't really seem to make sense. Obviously, you want landscaping and so forth, so it's a nice site, it's attractive, and likewise, the abutters see it as an attractive site. But some of the requirements in terms of commercial projects, imposing them on residential didn't make sense. But at the same time, you could see a development which is part commercial and part residential. So it could be, again, standalone because this would be an overlay district as a residential project, and commercial with it, on a site. So having discussed with town council, we explored a couple options. I think the recommendation we want to offer to the board is to give you some waiver discretions in there. So in the case of if you have a straight out residential project, you have the ability to waive certain provisions. If it's mixed, you could keep those provisions, or you may want to retain some of those provisions. And I think I'm going to actually show you. I'm going to stop screen sharing to pull up another document so I can point those out. It's easier because I highlight them in the share drive. So let me get those. So. Where's I hope I don't make hold on a second. Maybe I just sent it to you. Hold on a second. So this, what I'm going to pull up is the document that I pulled out sections from the B1, C1, and also the provision where we have design review. I don't think you want to be, so I have design review as part of a residential project if it's just strictly residential. So that's another provision in the bylaw. But again, it could be a waiver provision because it might have my apologies. I think it's in the email. So hold on.
Just so I understand better, this waiver scenario is to try to incentivize mixed use development, or
no, it's not necessarily incentivized. It's really to not have, if somebody decides to do a housing choice project within the overlay district, they're not conflicted by having a requirement that they can't meet.
I see. Okay.
So for example, let me just I hope the heck thought I put the shared drive in, so hold on a second. So a good example, as I'm going to pull this up for you, is like, for instance, when the B1 district, you're obviously familiar with the Bill 2 line. Well, that makes, there's a purpose for that in terms of when it's a mixed use development and trying to establish that streetscape along the line, but to stick with that rigid requirement for a residential project really probably doesn't make sense to do that. That potentially could be a conflict point. Another one is the pedestrian way. There's another provision within the B1 zoning district that, again, you may want to provide some flexibility, but the flexibility would be the board to have a waiver provision. So you wouldn't exclude it, so for example, the pedestrian way, go back to setback. Sorry. If you have the setback, the 6 to 19 feet where the building has to be set within that space, you could exclude it, but then you have a conflict because you got two different type of projects that could happen within the overlay district. Now, I'm hoping I didn't confuse you, which I might have.
No. You didn't confuse me. Thanks for the clarity. That's just, just trying to think through, right? Like our job is what suits what's the best thing for the town, right? And we've all collected a lot of feedback over the years from residents and developers, and I'm just trying to make sure that what I understand is mapping to what you're talking about with these waivers.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, and I said, and as I say that, a waiver is at least I'll call it a second tier option, so to speak, because you're not excluding it. So you could apply it if needed, as opposed to just eliminating it. But if you don't do anything with it, it's going to create conflicts. So that's the, let me see. I think I have the, oh boy, I don't see. That's frustrating. Have to have. Let me see. I'll find it. My apologies for the delay. Looking for it. Okay. All right, I found it. So. Okay, I'm going to screen share now. Okay. So these are, again, highlighted provisions within the B1, in this case, that we're talking about recommended to have a waiver provision.
So you're looking at waiver for the building scale, phase, pedestrian, like you said, pedestrian ways.
Pedestrian ways, street trees, pedestrian
access.
access. Again, this is more of this one here is more of an architectural kind of element of it, which this one, well, we need to change that obviously because it would be a higher unit per acre count. This one here we might just exclude as opposed to waive it, but that one needs to be addressed. And then similarly, lot and building requirement standards, the ones that I've highlighted here. Again, those are structured towards commercial, but we are talking about, again, a residential project, but it could be both. You could have a scenario where it's both. So that's why it would make sense to consider having a waiver provision. Same thing with these buffering requirements. Again, the build to line, which I mentioned to you before. So it's a question of PMLD. Again, probably one that there might be a case where somebody might want to use that PLD provision. But again, I think it's something that would be a waiver. This in terms of, now this is the C1D district. Be off. And there are similar, as you can see, there's similar requirements in the C1 district too as well. So it's really giving the board, again, the flexibility. It's not removing it, but it still has to apply to it. I mean, you still could apply it if necessary. So that was, I'm not, for tonight, it's really more your thoughts on waiver versus excluding it. That's really the discussion for tonight. And also, if it doesn't make sense what I'm saying, how they would conflict or not. If there's a question about that,
I think for me, it's a lot to digest all at once. I think I definitely need some time to read through it and see what's what.
Yep.
I do understand the power of the waiver and the reason to have it, but my only concern is overuse of a waiver and multiple delineations of different types of development as a result of us not keeping track of what we're issuing waivers for and where we're issuing those waivers so that we can have some sort of sense of consistency throughout the town, right? So I think, if we're finding ourselves constantly granting the same waiver in certain areas, then there's a larger discussion that kind of needs to be had.
So we could do, I'll call it another option, if you will. So I know other towns have basically pulled provisions that they like within their existing bylaw and put it into the overlay, so create their own set of standards. So there is no, you follow the housing choice overlay in terms of what those standards would be. So you're not, there's that option we could consider doing as well if you wanted to. I know I saw the Littleton one, which they did that similarly with site plan as well. I don't think we necessarily, Marissa, in terms of our site plan, don't think ours is that rigid in terms of the bylaw itself.
I didn't see anything in the site plan approval that would cause conflict. And just to kind of step back and point out exactly what we're talking about in this draft overlay district, under section D, dimensional requirements, it specifies that these certain sections are applicable to projects. So section, for example, section 310-9.2, which is the lot and yard requirements in the B1 district. Basically, what the overlay is saying as it's drafted is that those requirements apply to projects. So if someone wanted to come in and do a multifamily project as of right under the MBTA overlay district, they would still have to comply with all the dimensional requirements of the underlying B1 district. And those are the types of conflicts and parameters that we're talking about addressing. So the use of waivers would only be applicable in the overlay district, not townwide, to sort of address maybe you have a larger site where you could do buffering, for example, or some of the landscaping. Maybe there's a smaller parcel in the overlay where someone could do multifamily by right, but then these requirements, these dimensional requirements for landscaping buffers or building lines or other things could essentially serve as a barrier to a multifamily project if it was a smaller site and it couldn't really accommodate all of these requirements of the underlying B1. So that's where the waiver process would come in, only in the overlay district, or in the alternative, as Rich mentioned, some towns specifically put dimensional requirements in the overlay district. So then we wouldn't necessarily say, the underlying provisions of section 310-9.2, for example, are applicable. We wouldn't have that language in there. Instead, you would have the design requirements you want for a multifamily use. So it's really a matter of which route you want to take. Do you want to engage with waivers to sort of waive some of the requirements of the underlying district and keep all those underlying requirements in place, or specifically call out in the overlay what requirements would be applicable to a multifamily project? I hope that just gives a little bit of clarity on
It does.
on
Thank
where
you.
this conflict is.
Yeah, that's very helpful. The what I'm kind of seeing here is basically we can have the waivers, or we can essentially recreate what we did for the B1 district in a way, right? Where we have our design guidelines and certain height requirements and all of those things. So I think if we were to create essentially overlay bylaws, it would be pretty time consuming, and we don't know that we're going to get to the point that developers are going to want it to be. So we might end up redoing it anyway if we realize that what we're doing isn't feasible, which is kind of what we're realizing now about all of the work that went into the B1, not all of it, just some of the components. And so I'm wondering if we do waivers for the foreseeable future, and then we can take a step back and look at that, a year later, 6 months later, and say, okay, here's what it seems to be. Here's what seems to be the trends. Now we know what those bylaws should be, and then we can make that kind of more proactive going forward and bring it to town meeting. And then we'll have the data points to say, this is what we've proven is needed. And we do our best to stay within the B1, as was designed by the team that, put their blood, sweat, and tears into it for a couple of years. So we can try our best to stay within that and only make the waivers when we need to, and then take a look at that retroactively to create a proactive plan.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I definitely agree with that. It could be an exhausting effort to go through and redo all the guidelines to stipulations just for this. And the waivers
and possibly not get them right, and then
Right.
and then we could, we don't want to delay if there are developers that are interested in working with us, and we would like to do that and not make it difficult.
All right. So the sense would be then to put something together for you with a waiver provisions in there to to take a look at the next meeting. And it might, there is a lot to digest here, so I completely understand that. So, maybe we need maybe there's another meeting, right? But if we get it pretty close in February, maybe there's one more meeting of sorts to get it. Ultimately, the goal, I think the big picture goal of going through more of the recent zoning change we've done, we really wanted to have a pretty much final polished bylaw for the public hearing.
Right.
And that's the goal here again.
And public hearing would be March. That what
would
we're
be
talking
March, yeah, in March.
If I could just add a little bit of input here, I think that what Melissa is speaking to is precisely what we have seen happen with the affordable housing percentages increase, right? We had while I understand that Peter respectfully disagrees, we had a citizen that came to us with some things that he felt needed to be changed. At that time, 2 years ago, everybody's thoughts were, yes, we need to increase affordable housing, but we've come 2 years down the road, and now we see some things that we didn't, that's not what we wanted to have happen. So I think having that time frame to kind of sit back and take in data and information and digest it all, your decisions may be very different then than what they may be this evening or even in a month from now.
Yeah, and we already have the best case scenario, right? Because we have the B1 guidelines that are ideally the best case scenario. So, we're trying as much as we can not to depart from those, but there will be times when we have to. So at least we can stay as close as possible to what the town wanted.
Okay. So then I would, there's a couple of things I just want to share with you in terms of this first cut draft, and then we'll go back to it. So the first version you saw last time had quite a few definitions. So Marissa went back through it and looked them over and which ones that we probably should have, and then decide that wouldn't necessarily need to put forth all the ones that were in the guidance document that housing livable communities have put together for communities. But so these are some of the ones that, if you will, made the cut in terms of moving forward to give consideration to, which is affordable housing development. We don't have a definition for that. This one here is, correct me if I'm wrong as we go through these, Marissa, sorry. This be applicable town-wide because it will fit within the overlay district, but also could fit town-wide. The next one down as of right, we actually don't have a definition for that. It's certainly one that can be very helpful to have. Though most people understand it, but it wouldn't hurt to have that definition. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. You're right. It's good to have it.
So this one, in terms of building coverage, deciding to not necessarily, so we do lot coverage. Lot coverage is a little bit different the way we consider it versus building coverage. And when the model was developed for the housing choice, it was based on our lot coverage. So I know that at least what we have today in terms of lot coverage, the models are built on it. So I don't think we necessarily need to address that one. And we can have Town Hill overlay district and Palmville overlay districts.
Do we need to identify what Town Hill and Pondville is?
Yeah, so those will correspond with the map.
Okay.
So the companion to this will, it's not in this right now, but I'll show you the one. Well, so the one I showed you last time, I've spoken to Barry LaRiviera. He does the GIS for us. So he's going to put together the overlay zoning map with these districts on it for the meeting.
Okay.
So you'll see those areas depicted on there.
Rich, can I jump in on the building coverage part? I just had a comment on that.
Okay.
So if you do decide to keep the building coverage definition, the proposed definition for building coverage, it would need to be identified within the bylaw for the overlay district. And I added that sort of as a placeholder if you keep it under section D dimensional requirements. You'd have to set whatever the maximum allowable building coverage would be for a project. Because under the bylaw, lot coverage includes impervious surfaces, but building coverage under the model bylaw for MBTA does not include surface parking. So it would be a different number. So you don't really have a number for building coverage in the bylaw. So that would have to be determined and identified in the dimensional requirements for the overlay if you keep this in. So I just kind of want to flag that as a point. So if you keep it, you can have a discussion about whatever percentage that would be.
Is there, and then the alternative is we could just not include it and stick with our lot coverage, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any feeling one way or the other from the board on?
I'm fine with the building coverage. I mean, that's how the calculations were run, right?
No, the opposite.
Oh, the opposite.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay. So
Yeah,
what's the driving force then to include the building coverage? Is the fact that you can exclude the surface parking?
Well, that it's different. So they define
is.
built. Yeah.
I think arguably that would make sense because if you could exclude the surface parking, you could almost develop more of a lot. It gives you more space. You know, if say in the B1 in the underlying district, the maximum building coverage is 80% or something, or 60%, and you have to include impervious surfaces. If you don't have to include that under building coverage and say it was also 60%, you almost have more space to build out. I think it's more favorable of a definition, and it makes sense for, you know, the Commonwealth wanting to support multifamily housing in the MBTA areas.
Yeah.
I'll give you a version next month with it or without it. How's that?
Well, I mean, is it more common in other towns to have lot coverage or building coverage? Or do they do both?
Good question.
I would have to check on that. I'm thinking of one town, and I think they did go with building coverage because it is more desirable. It makes it a little bit easier because some towns with their MBTA overlay zoning have also changed, you know, parking requirements to make them a little bit less stringent, for example. So I could certainly check on that and see, you know, if there's not like a consensus, but if there's a general pattern to how building coverage is treated.
I mean, right now on the surface, I'm fine with having the building coverage in this inclusionary bylaw.
The overlay.
Not
in
in the I'm sorry, in the overlay. In the overlay, let me rephrase that, in the overlay. Not townwide, but in the overlay. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. All right, we'll take a look at that. And propose something back. This is just a modification of our existing lot definition, which honestly I think makes a lot of sense because we have more than one building on a lot in some instances. And we also have more than one use.
Mhm.
And so this kind of creates a little more flexibility. It's more open, but it's also more reflective of what we have actually.
Yep.
So this would be, again, applicable townwide. And so mixed use. So mixed use is kind of tricky because I will say we do have mixed use as a use, but not defined. But the way it's structured, it's not residential commercial. It's really mixing of uses. So it might be retail and office, or warehouse and office, or it's different than so this one here would be more applicable to the overlay district. Again, we don't have multifamily housing. I think this definition fits in the overlay in townwide.
Sorry, just one question. I'm just
Mhm.
I don't know if I need my glasses or not at this point. My eyes are so tired. I can't read this. A combination of residential and commercial uses arranged vertically. So does that mean that we have to have commercial and residential in the same building? Or can we have, well, I know you said it's different. It could be different industries, but in the way that we would probably use it and the way that it's been discussed kind of townwide, is more of the residential and commercial together. Does this mean that we'll have to have both of them in the same building vertically versus, like, for example, what is over, I know we don't want anything this big, but over by like University Ave in Westwood, there's apartments, and then there's separate from that, there are businesses.
Mm.
So the second part of this definition has or horizontally adjacent to one another, more than one building on a lot. Which provides some flexibility for that type of scenario. I do think this definition, this is difficult because in the B1, where, the requirement is the 65-35, this wouldn't necessarily be applicable, where you have maybe commercial buildings in the front of the lot and then residential in a separate building behind the lot where you don't have first floor commercial. So this is sort of a difficult one to work with, given the parameters in the B1. And this may not be the ultimate definition. I see this more of a sample of what it could be, as opposed to including, I'm just looking through the red line, where before it included industrial and residential and a combination of those uses. I think I had mentioned before, we may not want to define it as perhaps allowing residential and industrial in the same building, for example. They might not be compatible uses. So I certainly think the mixed use definition is a work in progress. And we can look at it some more.
Could it actually be, well, and maybe we don't even need it, you think? I wonder. I mean, that's the...
You know what? I feel like that one will be, depending on what we decide. I mean, I'd have to compare this with what we have in the B1
Sure.
docs, but because I don't know it off the top of my head, but we might want to keep this in here to just explain what I mean, I think if we had industrial in here, I think it would, there would be an uproar, because I don't think anybody really wants industrial in that tiny little center of town. But maybe if we could explain it in a way, if we do decide that we can do a little bit of commercial out front and residential behind at some point, I don't know if that fits in with the bylaws currently, but maybe it might diffuse some folks if we did have a definition, so that, just like we did with the sign bylaw, showing them an image of what it would be was way less scary. So maybe if we found a way to just type it up the way that we expect it to be, that would be less scary, it could be helpful. It's a lot of changes, you know, all at once.
Okay. Multifamily housing. I think that one's
Looks fine.
pretty straightforward. Yeah. Open space. We don't have one now.
Is
Go
that
ahead.
that would be a definition just for the overlay or for townwide?
I think this might be probably more suited just for now to the overlay district.
Okay.
You know, because the trip up a little bit with that is, you know, when it says undeveloped land, I don't want to get caught up, but for example, you know, a recreation complex, although it's not a development, something would you say that's developed or not, right? That there's
okay, that's fine.
Building and so forth, but
okay.
Parking surface, I think we don't have that definition.
No, we don't, and it's a good add about the solar panel piece.
Yeah. And the next one down is really, you know, so we have dwelling unit. And then obviously it starts out with quarters for a single family. What's being proposed is called residential dwelling unit. And then the rest of it remains, which is what we have on the books today.
So we currently have residential dwelling unit as a townwide definition.
So we just have dwelling unit. It doesn't say residential.
I get okay.
And then it starts out quarters for a single family.
So then you're looking at adding residential dwelling unit as a definition just under for the overlay. Okay.
No, I'm thinking this could be fine townwide. I mean, maybe there's not agreement on that, but it's more broader in terms of definition. So it's a residential dwelling. It could be apartment as a dwelling unit, which they are, or a single family home, and it's and then you see the definition what's included within that dwelling unit.
Okay. So
You
as
know,
far as the warrant goes, I think we need to specify which one of these are going to go where, which one are townwide, which are just for overlay.
Yes. And I think, well, there's two ways we could, well, there's probably more than two ways, but maybe the easiest way is the ones that are applicable to the overlay are within the bylaw. And then the ones that are newer, townwide, well, both the overlay and townwide, we put in the definition section. Then we could flip them out. We could put the ones that are in the overlay in the definition section and just specify that they're for the housing choice overlay district.
Does that make it two separate articles then? Because we're affecting two separate sections.
It would make it two separate articles. Yeah, although we are doing them all together though. Separate action item, right?
If I could just jump in here.
Sure.
I think that if you added it into the overlay bylaw, that section would be within that warrant article for the overlay. You would just have a separate section, definitions within the overlay. So that could be its own warrant article as it is now. And then the second warrant article after that would be the definitions, which is how this is drafted. So this draft for proposed warrant articles has these definitions going into the definitions for the whole bylaw. Which is why, for example, for building coverage, I added the language in the Town Hill Pondville overlay district, specifying that definition only applies in the overlay. If these were all to go into the overall definition section in the bylaw,
Okay.
But certainly another way to do it would be just take the definitions that are applicable to the overlay and have those within the overlay bylaw. And I've seen towns do it that way as well. And that's often done even for other bylaws, not necessarily MBTA, but sometimes a solar overlay district might have definitions within it rather than in the overall bylaw.
Okay.
That seems like a pretty clean way to do it, you know, to differentiate between what we're doing for all of the bylaws versus the overlay. If we just put just overlay specific definitions in the overlay article.
One complete package altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, that makes more clarity. Thank you. Insight. So the way the article's written now is all these would be going into the full bylaws, but as we're going through it, we're finding out that some of them really just only apply to the overlay. So I think it would be a better, cleaner approach. Like we're all in agree. Sounds like we're all in agreement on that, of taking these handful out and just putting in the overlay bylaw.
Yeah, and just a quick summary of why we started this way is because we went, which, you know, we within that general code recodification package that they did, before that we had definitions in different sections of the bylaw. Going through that recodification, we took a lot that were in different sections of the bylaw and put them all in the definition section. However, there are the town's bylaws, so it doesn't mean we have to stay 100% true to that. So if the comfort level is what Marissa just said, put the ones that are in the bylaw, and the other ones go in the general section, we'll go that route.
Well, okay, so you're right. During the recodification, we tried to eliminate all these specialties in each section. So if we're gonna stay true to that, then if we're putting all these in the main bylaws, we have to somehow differentiate that these only apply to the overlay, like what Marissa had shown on the, scroll up a little bit, Richard, on the, what is it, the
building coverage?
Yeah, the building coverage. So we'd need to be very specific on any of these that apply to just those districts.
Now I'm going to talk against myself from sticking to the recodification format. The only reason why I say that is under the old bylaw, we also had things were capitalized when they were defined.
Yes, they were.
So for the reader, you would know, oh, hey, building coverage, that's defined. And then you go look for the definition. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case anymore.
It's not.
Which I might argue that since we're creating kind of specialty provisions, it may be better within that bylaw section.
Well, it's definitely a tough. I mean, yeah,
it's a tough one, you know. I mean,
right.
We'll give you an option. How's that?
Yeah. Okay.
You can think about it. Transit station. I think I might want to add bus service too in here. I was just thinking about it because I looked at our definition for transit. And while technically we have on-demand bus service through GATRA, we don't really have. I don't know. Well, I'll propose something to you. See, we may leave it out, but
okay.
Apologize for my hoarseness. And then so we did define, like I said, Town Hill, Pondville. So we define those or named those overlay districts, which is what other towns have done. And then again, here's that map that Barry will put together for us that
Yeah, because that's
Well
really
created.
hard to read. That's well, and black and white's going to be impossible. So
Yeah. So I can assure you what he produces will be way better than this. It will be. It has to be. So
yeah.
And this is really only a screenshot on this report too, so it's even harder to read. But
yep.
And then that's the companion to it. And then the thought would be everything is bundled in one article, then maybe two.
And then those are really, these last two articles are really more kind of housekeeping
they're
articles to
housekeeping.
like,
Yeah, they're
all
kind
right,
of right.
these are now those districts and here's the overlays and right.
Yeah, correct. Yep. But still, and the thought is again,
now we need to define, well, we need to specify the U zone.
Yes.
Rich, we lost your audio.
You don't hear me?
I can hear you.
I hear him.
Can anybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you hear Rich?
Can you
if you're
hear
talking,
us?
you hear me.
Can't hear you, Rich.
That is so interesting. We can hear him.
I hear
Chad,
Rich.
can you hear us?
All right. Okay, I'm back. I don't know, something on my end.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
great.
good.
Welcome back, Chad.
I somehow I lost my audio. Lost my speakers. My microphone worked.
Oh, good. Well, you only heard me coughing, so you didn't miss much. Unfortunately, sorry. So the thought is that so we were going to proceed with the housing choice would be in one article to be bundled. Thumbs up, thumbs down, basically, because they're a package. You can always break this apart if you feel otherwise. And then the affordable one was on its own as a separate article. So they weren't essentially really two articles.
Okay. That makes sense. So you're going to go back. So next steps, Rich, next steps are go.
So next steps is to put together a 90% draft. How's that from a design standpoint?
Okay.
I'm shooting for a little bit higher, but I'll go 90.
All right.
And then hopefully 90 is just a matter of making a couple adjustments, and then I could pass around and you can just let me know, and then we can put it on the warrant.
Okay. So 90% draft prior to next meeting. Next meeting, we go through all this again. Hopefully get it wrapped up, if possible, or maybe a few modifications thereafter to get it ready. Then public hearing is in March.
Yes.
And advisory.
Oh, good point. Thank you for the cue. So David Lutz had written back to go see them in February or at some point in that February timeframe, just as an overview to explain essentially why the changes that we did in 21 in terms of the B1, doesn't satisfy the housing choice requirements.
Okay.
And so keep it at, kind of that high level, have a public hearing, and then return afterwards with, a vote of the recommendation of the planning board to advisory.
Okay.
Which, to me, it makes a lot of good sense. So you can basically cover that ahead of time, and then this is what we need to do. And just quickly, well, I think you all know, we could recap in the next meeting. So that next question, next meeting. So the meeting's the 13th. You got I did hear someone say it was kind of getting late. So is almost a duplication of this meeting too late for next week? Do you need another separate meeting? What's the thoughts? Yeah.
Well, so next meeting right now would potentially be an hour for master plan, right? And then if I'm looking there's quite a few site plan modifications that could be coming forward. We don't know if they're all coming forward, but there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different site plans that could be coming forward that could be very involved or very little involved. Are any of those public hearings, or are they just informal?
The Pond Street Solar is a public hearing.
Okay.
And then the rest of them, if they come in, they would also be public hearings.
So we could have a lot of public hearings this next meeting, plus a master plan, plus to go through all these bylaws. So that would be a very lengthy meeting if that all comes to fruition. We don't know if it will. So then the question would be is, do we want to peel off the master plan as a separate meeting?
So does that mean we're going to end up with 3 meetings in February? Because we might have to have an extra one for bylaw stuff.
Now you're scaring me, Chris.
Well, I mean, I'm reading the tea leaves over here and picking up what Rich is throwing down.
No, that's not the tea leaves. Sorry. The tea leaves would be one other meeting, and then so your regular meeting, then another meeting.
Well, but Rich, you're also saying that if we don't get it all wrapped up at the first meeting in February, let's just say we punt the planning board to a different week in February, and we have our normal meeting on the 13th, and we don't finish all the bylaw changes, then will we add like a little bit of extra time after the master plan to wrap it up?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think that
so that we don't do a third meeting like Chris is
right
saying we might have to do. I mean, because I agree. Yeah. We also have the kids have a week off of school in February, so that's a whole week where I'm sure a lot of us are going to be doing family.
I'm away most of February, but I'm committed to this. I'm going to be there the 13th, even though I'm in Florida. I mean, I'll be here as best I can. But yeah, travel's going to be tough.
Work trips to Florida in February are amazing.
They're the worst. Are you kidding me? Oh, the sun. And yeah, it's terrible.
So in terms of work prioritizing the workload or work items, I would probably recommend, shifting the master plan after maybe vacation potentially.
Okay.
And then take care of the regular business and the zoning bylaws to get those on their way.
Okay, so if we shift master plan to say the 27th, let's just throw it out there as a possibility.
Yeah.
And we could potentially reserve time after the 1 hour master plan to wrap any last minute loose ends on the bylaws.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rich, do you know when the advisory board wants to see you in February?
No, I don't. I don't even. I mean, I say February. I don't know if it's going to be February, but
March. Okay, so maybe you'll with your scheduling. It sounds like it might have to be March. Maybe their first round in March.
Yeah. And I think I could reach out to David and see what their schedule looks like in terms of scheduling the public hearing too. So we could have flexibility on that, we could
Okay.
work around that.
Well, I think that makes the most sense because our meeting on the 13th could be extremely long and time consuming if all these site plans come in. So
Yeah.
my recommendation then would be to move that master plan meeting to 2 weeks later. And I guess if we have to do that via Zoom, we could. So we don't necessarily need the room, but does that
Right.
conflict with anything else? Does that conflict with any other meetings that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, because it ends up being the 4th week in the month there. So, then we have, yeah.
Well, that would be my recommendation. What's the rest of the board feel?
I think that sounds fine. Looks like it's going to be a big agenda, so moving master plan to the 28th is fine with me.
What?
And
Yeah. And on the flip side, if all these site plans don't come in, well, then that just gives us more time on the 13th to just hammer this out as much as possible.
Right. So what you said that I heard 28th, is that right?
Whatever. I thought it was
What day?
27th.
27th? Okay.
Tuesday, the 27th of
Oh
February.
yeah, you're right.
Okay. All right, that's good. I'll let Josh know and the rest of the master plan steering committee members.
Okay.
I think that takes us to the end of the agenda for tonight.
Okay. Any other new business?
I don't have any.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
All right, roll call vote. Eric,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Good night.
Good night.